name's Patrick Carrey. I work at Red Hat, so I'm here to talk to you today about how to monetize open source, and if you're participating in a community or you started your own project, what you might be able to do, what options are available to do that. So, is anyone here participating in open source at the moment? Yes, brilliant. Is anyone actually running your own project or anything like that? Yeah? Awesome. All right. So we'll talk about that in the back half. So to start out, disclaimer is that I'm from Red Hat. So I'm going to spend the first half of the talk saying, how does Red Hat make money? And where did we come from and how did that work? Red Hat's a multinational company now, been around for about 30 years almost. So what they're doing today might not be relevant for you if you're looking to monetize something immediately, but as one of the largest open source companies, it's a good indicator of what you can do and where you can go with it. So to start out, definition of open source, it's something we all need to agree on before we go too much further. There is on this link, opensource.org/OSD, is a really great definition of what open source is by the Open Source Foundation. It's about 3 paragraphs long, so I thought I'd just take the dictionary one. It's a bit easier to fit on the slide. But essentially, I think we can all agree from a technical background, it's to do with making the source code freely available, freely distributable, and you are able to modify it if you like. That's what open source is. It's pretty straightforward. Now, how are you going to make money with that? Well, it said absolutely nothing in there about business or nothing about commercial prospects or how to manage that. So open source is more of if you wanted to put it in a bucket, it would be a development model. You can make your source code available to people. They can make changes to it, contribute back, make a copy if they like. It's great. We are all collaborating and building and learning together. But if you want to make money, how do you do it when you give away your intellectual property? Well, that's the real challenge, because what do you buy then if you're giving away everything already? So the good news is that it is possible. This is sort of mostly a list collected off the top of my head, but all of these companies are open source companies, and they've all been very successful businesses as well. So it's good to see that. I did make a mistake, so I hope that's not going to be recorded. It should be GitLab, not GitHub. I realized a bit too late as I was on the train here, so please just ignore that bit. But there is open source code repositories. You can do that. All right. Does everyone else recognize most of the other ones on the screen? They're all familiar? Yeah? Cool. So how does Red Hat do it? So Red Hat's a little bit cheeky in the way that they've gone about doing their open source business model, because while they do give away the source code for free and it's still available on what I suspect is probably the original URL of ftp.redhat.com, there are now other ways you can get it as well. But the source code is freely available, but what they've done is they've licensed the binaries after they've compiled them. So they've compiled the binaries, they've licensed that and all the testing methods and building methods that they take from source code to actual Linux distribution. Because when they started out in the early 90s, you couldn't just download things as easy off the internet with your 56K modem. You had to do things in a little bit differently. And if anyone here remembers, it probably is a few people getting big stacks of Linux CDs actually back in the day. Insert CD 8 of 24 or something like that. So that's how Red Hat's done it. So they can get around the sort of the licensing component of open source. I've got here the Red Hat Linux, which was the early 90s, and then Enterprise Linux, which you're probably more familiar with today. Interestingly, I couldn't find the box for Enterprise Linux 8, which was released about a month ago, so perhaps we're not shipping CDs anymore and we've maybe modernized a bit. So Red Hat started at Linux, but they've grown a lot since the early 90s. We're active participants in the open source communities in a large number of them. So as we heard earlier at the start, there's a lot. over 1 million active projects out there in the open source community. Red Hat, if every product that we have an open source community where you can take that product and start using it without any issues or any payment or anything like that. So you can see here, Enterprise Linux, the upstream here is Fedora. And, that's one that sort of we started out, as well as we've made acquisitions and open sourced the companies that we were proprietary before, as well as adopting and participating in other active open source communities such as OpenStack and Kubernetes as well. So from Linux, they've grown to have quite a large portfolio encompassing storage, infrastructure, middleware, as well as services and training and things like that. One of the things that people don't often realize is that when you're purchasing from Red Hat, you're not necessarily purchasing the software because that's open source. One of the things most people suspect is you're purchasing support up here on board. But there's more to it than that. You get the customer portal, which is a single entry point for all customers to contact and interface with Red Hat. The knowledge base articles. If anyone here has ever downloaded software off GitHub and tried to compile it with that one-page README, you start to realize how nice it is to have good documentation. It's necessary. We also have security. We have a security team that is scanning out, looking through our source code for any security issues or vulnerabilities, as well as monitoring the CVE database and patching and responding to any of those security issues that might arise. Things like Spectre and Meltdown come to mind. Heartbleed, Red Hat was forefront in being involved in fixing those issues. Certifications. This is something that's a little bit different. So with our software, we work with our partners and our vendors. So hardware manufacturers like Dell, HP, Cisco, as well as the public cloud providers. And we work with them to make sure that if you purchase our software, that it's going to run on that hardware that's being built. It'll work on the newest generation of Intel chips. You need to know that that's going to happen and trust that that's part of what you're purchasing. We also work with the other software vendors to certify that their software will run on our software. So things like databases and SAP, whatever it is, you want to know that there's going to be operability between that. Things have changed since 10 or 15 years ago when you had to manually jump in and do your own Xorg config on GNOME and try and guess all the right answers. No documentation. Now it sort of all just works out of the box. So it's kind of the long way that we've come from 15 years ago. Support we touched on, lifecycle. If you're an enterprise and you're adopting open source technology, you want to know that that technology is going to be there in 5 years' time, 10 years' time. So we give guarantees around how long we're going to support each release. If you download something off GitHub, you might get the bus factor. So I was looking at GitHub stats earlier this week, and one of the companies that rates, how popular GitHub repositories are, actually has forks and likes and contributors and has a bus factor. Like, how many people would need to leave this community to severely impact its life cycle? Is it going to still be supported if 3 people decide to leave and have a falling out? And some of those communities can be quite fragile in the early days. And the last one is assurance. This is one I'm going to try and not bang on about too much, but as we heard earlier, there's a lot of licenses that you need to sort of look at when you're distributing software. So if you're building a software and whatever language you choose to use, you're going to pull in libraries and dependencies from other places. And those libraries and dependencies will have their own licenses for them. So if your project has 10 dependencies or 100 dependencies, are you the person that's going to go back and check those licenses are that they work for you to distribute your code? Are you going to check if they've changed? And how's that going to work? So Red Hat goes out, speaks to all of the vendors, all the libraries, and makes sure that anything that we ship is not going to get you in trouble if you use our software. And if there is an issue, Red Hat will help you. You tell them, I'm in legal trouble because I used something that you shipped, we will help you get involved and make sure you don't get taken out by patent trolls or, one man in his van or whatever that is to build a library that you happen to pull in. So it's kind of something that you don't really think about when you're going pulling things down from the internet or copy pasting from Stack Overflow. But Stack Overflow actually owns that software that's on their snippet. It's not you just taking it from there. So it's something to be aware of if you're going to go into business and start monetizing a project. So you started out with your project and you're like, okay, how do I monetize my open source project? My wallet looks like this. I just went to Oxford DevOps and I went down to the pub afterwards and now I'm broke again. So what are my options and where do I start? All right. So the first one everyone thinks of is support and services. It's a really easy way for you to start getting some money coming in from customers that are using your open source projects. Red Hat and Canonical, shout out to Ubuntu in here. They do a great job of this. Provide services, on demand support if you need it, something goes wrong. It's a really great way to, as I said, to get the money coming in, but also to interface with your customers. You've got customers out there, they're using your project, they're having a problem, they're looking for help. So let's talk to them. How are they using your software? What are they using it for? What problem do they have? Let's fix this and then, make sure that use case works better in the future. So fix their problem, we'll fix whatever is in the project. And then you've got a new use case and it's almost a reference customer if you need to, start building out your customer base more. So definitely support and services is something you should think about. The downside is it's not going to scale very well. All of a sudden you've got 10 customers and then you have 50 customers, 100 customers, and you're still sitting there answering support emails by yourself. It gets hard to scale that up and get your own skill set moving forward. Another way to do it is to look at advertisements as another source of potential revenue. If your project is something that you could put advertising on, that's a great way to get started and actually make money overnight while you're sleeping. So Mozilla Firefox is great at this. They got that little search toolbar, and the first drop down on there, they sold that position as the default search provider when you install their browser. And so that's a great way for them to make money. And as a consumer of Firefox, that's great. I'm happy that they're making money. It doesn't cost me a thing. It's still free for me. So advertising is great from an end user point of view. And it's a great way for you to start making money. Adblock is another interesting one. Put this up there because it's kind of ironic because the way they make money is they whitelist advertisers. So you can pay Adblock to get your ad through Adblock. It's a bit ironic, but hey, look, it's successful for them. So they're a company that's been very successful with that. It's a unique way to make money for them. One of the really popular ways is what's called open core. So I'm sure that some of you have seen this before. You have a community edition or an open source edition of your software. Make it available to everyone. You start getting some groundswell. People are talking about it. But then there's going to be additional features or enhancements that you'll use and you can charge for them. So you might be targeting a specific set of users like enterprise customers, for example, and say, well, if you need enterprise level security or authentication or integration with a certain tool that you already got in your company, we can do that for you, but you've got to pay. So you've got a customer that's already using your software, they're obviously happy with it and they want to continue using it. And then you can start charging for these additional capabilities. And as you build out your use cases and your different use cases for your software, you might find you get repeat requests for similar things. So it might be a common thing like LDAP integration, something that lots of people use, but you will be able to charge for it because community edition users might not require that kind of level of authentication. So yeah, there's another one here. This is the new GitLab logo. I would have changed it on the train, but the Wi-Fi sucked. So GitLab, great hosted example. Actually, both of these are really great hosted examples. WordPress sort of pioneered this back in the day with their CMS. They made making a website really easy so non-technical people could do this. They even got it down to what they called their famous 5-minute install, where you could download the software, get it up and running within 5 minutes. But they managed to then provide a hosted offering where you got hosting services included. You had a domain name under WordPress.com, and they installed and managed it for you. And businesses out there just went for it and sold them out of stock because it was a convenience thing. They said, well, it's free, but you've got to install it yourself, which takes 5 minutes. But the convenience factor was something that all of their customer base jumped on, and they're a multi-million-dollar company now doing CMS. So that was awesome for them. GitLab also was very similar. It was quite easy to get set up and get going, but as a hosted offering, people were prepared to pay for convenience. And so that's another way that if your project is suited for a SaaS version, it's a way that you can monetize as well. I actually wasn't terribly aware of this one. So it's called a hybrid or a dual license. So I'm not going to talk about licenses too much because I'm not a lawyer, and I don't want to get in trouble from any of you later in the track. But if you have an open source license agreement, there are a lot of these. But generally, one of the ones that's favored is that you can make your source code freely available, and then if anyone uses it, they have to then make their source code freely available if it's been requested. Or you might have one that says if you make an enhancement, you need to give that back to the community or something along those lines. This is kind of where a lot of the majority of licenses are under open source. But the reason I've got mostly database vendors up here is because it's more easy to understand in that use case that if you want to use the database, but you want to use it in a commercial way or proprietary way, and you don't want to give away the workings of your products, so you want to embed a database and then have something like a black box. Maybe you're building a black box flight recorder, and that's proprietary technology that you don't want to share with competitors or fruit machines or whatever it is, something that's secret. You can sell, if you own the project, you can sell a proprietary license to a vendor, and then they can use that however way they like. They have the rights to it, but they don't have to share anything or give anything back. And because they've bought that proprietary license from you, they're in a position that that's fine. But you, at the same time, are still maintaining an open source license, and people are free to use that if they like. So it's a really cool way to sort of embed your software, making money from that as well, but you're keeping the open source available. So it's a nice way to sort of not ruin the ethos of open source, but still be a commercial company. And MySQL was really good at that before they got bought out. And then Redis as well was, did you guys see they changed their license to not be so friendly with the hyperscalers? Yeah, so some of you did. So the hyperscalers were using some of these software, Redis in particular, and they were charging for it. They weren't participating in the sort of the ethos of open source. And so Redis went out and changed their license so that anyone that they were specifically targeting the hyperscalers in the new license so that they couldn't benefit from all their work without giving back to the community, essentially. So this is the website I put up before, opensource.org. If you are interested in looking at the licenses, I would say very much have a look there. They've got what's called Open Source Initiative approved licenses, so ones that the Open Source Foundation has looked at and said, yeah, we approve these meet our definition of open source. That's about 3 paragraphs long. And they do go into sort of say these are the most popular ones and explain them in quite simple and easy to understand terms. And if you're interested, they even tell you how to implement the licenses without a lawyer present, or if you don't want to get into that, just want to get rolling with something and start building out code, then this is definitely a way to look at what's required and the easiest way to get started without having to fork out for a lawyer. So the best way is probably is to do all of the above, really. You look at some of the quite large open source companies at the moment, around some of the ones we're up on the board, the database providers, Enterprise DB, MariaDB, all of these guys, they're actually going to be doing a combination of all of them. So, have your support and services available, do your open core approach if you like, if that's what you want to do, or resell proprietary licenses, whatever it is. Still merchandise as well. Merchandise is a great way to sort of spread your awareness. And if this IT thing all falls through, I reckon half the IT people still have jobs because they make a lot of t-shirts. So they're all going to go into the t-shirt printing business. So don't adopt just one approach, adopt as much as you can. Someone once said that if you're never going to get rich unless you can make money while you sleep. So a combination of these approaches, you might start making a few bucks while you're in bed. And that's the dream. Let me know if it works out for you because I'd love to jump on board. So we talked about how you can make money with open source. You can be at the big end with the Red Hats and the SUSEs, the Canonicals, etc. But why should you adopt this approach if you're not up at the big scale playing in the global scale yet? Well, there's only two things we're going to touch on here, and the first one is the power of the crowd. So if you start spreading awareness and you get some groundswell around your project and people start using it more, then you're going to get a lot of awareness and you're going to get a lot of mind share. People are looking for new technology all the time. Every company is a technology company. And open source has a really great advantage because it's got a low barrier of entry. If you're looking for a solution to something, the first thing everyone does is they Google it. If they hit your project, it's easy for them to have a look, get started, see if it works for them. Then you're already one step ahead of it. All the proprietary companies that require a phone call, a few emails to get a trial license for a week or something, they're already up and running with your open source. You can build a community around it, forums, chat rooms, mailing lists, whatever, and they can see that it's active and there are people using them. And that gives them a nice fuzzy feeling that they're not the only ones out there trying to make this free software work for them. And then once you've got that, you've already got an active customer using it. It's not hard for them to get an upsell on a new capability or a support agreement or something like that. So it's definitely a good way to get through the door and get people using your software and finding out if it's working. And it's a great way for you to test the market. Is there market demand for whatever your project is? You'll find out soon enough. And if it's even in the space you expect, you might find that you get a whole bunch of customers using your software in a completely different way. And then you've found a niche, but it was somewhere else. And the other one is that innovation happens in open source. We've all had it, I suspect, where you turn up to work one day, you're having a conversation and someone tells you, oh, there's this new shiny toy. We've all got to try it. It's going to solve all your problems in IT. Check this one out. There's a few up here that I'm sure were the new shiny toys for you at one point. And so that once you get that groundswell happening, people are talking about it, they're going to try it. If you're lucky, you're going to get a huge groundswell where you've got 6,000 people contributing to your code base, extending it in ways you never thought possible, and doing it out of their garage on the weekend, not costing you a thing. There's not many companies that have 6,000 contributors to their code, so that's a great way to get going. And open source seems to be innovating a lot faster than a lot of the other companies are these days. So with 6,000 people, you're going to be a leader in some space. The last way to make money is acquisition. It might happen when you least expect it, and it works for a long time. In the 90s and things like that, Microsoft and IBM, Oracle, whoever were buying up all the .com companies, and they all made a lot of money out of that. So it wasn't called a bubble for a reason, but you can still do it. I still think it's a business model. That one maybe don't aim for. And then after you've done all that, you're going to have these fun coupons, and you can stand off the back of your boat and flick them at people. So that's everything.